Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Ensuring Accessibility in PlayPosit, a USC Marshall School of Business approach. Thank you for taking some time to join us today. And as some folks have already done, please feel free to let us know in the chat where you're joining from, and so we can see all the folks from around the country who are tuning in today. But let's get started and spend our time together here with our guest. We'll be joined in just a moment by David Malone. So just a quick introduction on our guest for today. David Malone has been with the USC Marshall School of Business since the fall of 2018. He is a distinguished educational technologist with over 2 decades of experience in both instructional design and e-learning. He currently serves as the Director of Instructional Design at the USC Marshall School of Business, where he leads a team of instructional designers in creating and enhancing online and hybrid graduate programs. David's expertise lies in collaborating with faculty and program staff to develop high-quality courses, providing comprehensive training to ensure effective use of educational technology and pedagogy, and enhancing accessibility for course materials, which is why we are having this conversation today. So without further ado, let's bring David onto the stage. Hi, David. How are you today?
Great. Thanks, Dylan. How are you? And how's everybody in the room?
Great. Thanks so much. I will let you get to it, and I'll be in the chat. So.
Okay. Wow. All right. Thanks, Dylan. Cool. This is great. I've been preparing for this for some time. As Dylan mentioned, I'm here to kind of share our journey today at the USC Marshall School of Business with making our course content more accessible and making sure we're providing an equitable experience for all students that are attending classes at USC Marshall School of Business as well. So my slide deck today, it's about ensuring accessibility in PlayPosit, and it's just kind of I'm more of a storyteller. So this is going to be more about our approach for how we got there, and how we looked at our professors' content and how we started engaging with professors on how to remediate their content and make it more accessible. And there are a lot of great reasons to do so, and some of that's what I'll be sharing during this presentation. So, one big, huge disclaimer: I am not a lawyer. I'm an instructional designer by trade. Before that, I was a webmaster. I don't know if that job title really exists anymore, but yeah, kind of showing my age. But I am not a lawyer. But however, this is everybody's problem, and it's everybody's opportunity. And I just kind of put up a couple bullet points about one recent lawsuit where Berkeley had a lot of free online content that was out there and available on the internet, and they got sued. It was found that they violated Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act because the content wasn't accessible. And it wasn't just limited to the videos. It was limited to like navigation to the videos. And, it was basically 20,000 videos worth of content. And this was back in 2016. And UC Berkeley had to take all of that content down because it wasn't made accessible. And this wasn't because there was somebody with disabilities trying to access this content. This was because there was a civil rights group that noticed this, and they turned around and they sued UC Berkeley under the Title II. And that's kind of what I want to get into today, is that it's not a reactive exercise to, it should not be a reactive exercise to make your content accessible. Your content needs to be accessible regardless of whether you have a student or other users with disabilities that need to be addressed, that require accommodations. The law states that content needs to be accessible. And there's a few, weird differences and some granularity in those laws. So I'm going to talk briefly about those, at least what my understanding is. And I also, coming back to I'm not a lawyer, I have a great team of instructional designers, and they also are great advocates for students accessibility accommodations, making sure things are equitable. And I learned by doing. Most of us are learning by doing. So I was kind of in the same spot a lot of you are in right now. So I hope in going through this, some of you learned something. I'm open to questions. I'm open to comments saying, hey, no, you're wrong. You should be doing this. I mean, I just want this to be kind of a free, open share of ideas right here. So, but here's a link to the article about the resolution of that lawsuit from UC Berkeley. As you can see, it's dated from 2022. So these things take quite some time to get resolved. But we want to be in a great place so things like this do not happen at your institutions. So understanding the laws is kind of the first step. And there are two main laws that come into play here. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's a civil rights law that was enacted. And there's two sections of there. There's Title II and there's Title III. And those specifically prohibit discrimination against qualified persons in state and local government agencies. And this would encompass public universities as well. And then Title III does the same thing, but it also includes private universities. So privately owned, leased, or operated facilities. And then there was another major update to the ADA in April of this year that sets the technical standards for websites and mobile applications. It sets a standard by which communication technologies, I'll say ICT tools, need to be at to be able to kind of meet the requirements in the ADA. And that's WCAG 2.1 AA as the conformance standard. But like I said, I don't want to get too much into the weeds with this, but there's links that I can definitely provide after the fact, and they're in my slide notes, and I'll be providing those to PlayPosit so those can be disseminated with the recording. And then there's also the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and there's two sections in there, 504 and 508. And there's a lot of overlap and a lot of, I encountered a lot of confusion understanding this. But what I think it boils down to is Section 504 covers accommodations and civil rights. And that it prevents discrimination based on disability in areas of education, employment, and rehabilitation, especially if there's federal funding attached to that, as many of us have, federal funding, we're at universities. But also failing to make digital tools and content available can violate Section 504. And 508 is another section, and that the way it's written, it applies to federal agencies, but what I want to mention in here in 508, it provides additional guidance on how to remediate content and provide for technology-based accommodations. So this would be auxiliary aids, hearing aids, braille readers, swell printers, all the way down to what must happen on websites and internet, web-based applications to make those accessible. So a lot of institutions kind of look at 508 as a standard to meet. And in California, it's actually a requirement, additional requirement, that community colleges and the Cal State University system need to meet Section 508 standards. So that's kind of accepted as a rule, a law of the land. And even though 508 applies to federal agencies specifically, it sets great guidance for everybody to look at the accommodations and the tools that they're providing users, students, people that encounter their services with disabilities, and how to remediate those things. So the too long didn't read version of this, my takeaway at least, was that Title II and Title III of the ADA, it makes it clear that colleges and universities need to work to provide a more inclusive environment for persons with disabilities, whether these are documented or not. In Marshall's example, we had a student who was blind, but these, accommodations and inclusion initiatives need to cover everybody. It needs to cover color blindness, deafness, depression, anxiety disorders, sensory disorders, anything you could think of, because you want to provide an equitable experience for all your students, and you want to give them all a chance to learn. And this is where my understanding of this, or my kind of stake in this, kind of separates from, oh, it's just a legal issue. It's not. We need to make sure all students have a chance to learn, regardless. They might not even report their disability, but you want to make sure that your content and your teaching and your pedagogical practices are accessible by everyone in the classroom. So Section 508 dictates that accommodations must be provided when needed, and it also provides that good kind of template by which you can, look at your technology. And 504 dictates that all materials must be made inaccessible from an accommodation standpoint. All of this has been scare tactics, and I have to admit, when I was kind of presenting my case to leadership at USC, I kind of padded my slide deck with a whole list of bullet points about lawsuits, a whole list of bullet points like why we need to do this. And now I'm realizing more why we should do this. So it's a question of advocacy versus scare tactics. The journey that we had at Marshall, which I'm going to go into in a bit, it required a lot of legwork. I had to work with different groups across the university that I hadn't encountered before, and I had to learn a lot of stuff. And I, had to admit I didn't know a lot of stuff to begin with. So, but be a dolphin and not a shark. And that's a quote that that was shared with me by Lainey Feingold. And one of my instructional designers pointed that out. She's a great resource on how to advocate for change at institutions and at your universities, at your schools, wherever you might be, to pay more attention to accessibility and accommodations and student needs. Lainey Feingold is a lawyer, so I source her a lot in this presentation. But it's not just the legal aspects of it. It's her presentations come from a great place on how to be an advocate. And I encourage everybody to, if you don't take anything away from my presentation, take away this URL and this name and Google it later, because it's really eye-opening stuff. I had to be a shark quite a bit, but now I'm kind of being more of a dolphin. So that's the lesson I learned out of this. Okay, speaking about what's happening at Marshall, I've referenced it a bit. So here's the background. USC admitted a student in fall 2023. He had total vision impairment. He didn't use a Braille reader. He used screen readers. So we kind of had, some things to work on. We had to kind of put our heads together to figure out how we can accommodate the student in his classes. Accommodations prior to that, as far as I was concerned, or as I knew, and what I had to encounter is time and a half or 2 times. And, we always encountered that. And I'd go in the LMS, which Brightspace or Canvas, depending on what the program would be. And we'd go in and we'd adjust the time for assessments. We'd adjust some due dates. And all those students came with a letter from OSAS, which is our Office of Student Accessibility Services. So we just got emails from them. We went into the LMS, we changed it. But this required obviously a much deeper partnership with them. So we learned about this student who was admitted. We were notified in July of 2023, and it was a big scramble. Like, what do we do? I knew of okay, alt text and color contrast and headers and those sort of things that I normally try to do day to day in building content, and I share with my team. But this, we had to go above and beyond. So we had to ask a lot of questions, and we had to get a lot of phone numbers and email addresses, and just marshal everybody. Marshall, pun intended. Fight on. He's back to the student though. He's currently a sophomore, and he's pursuing studies in finance. So he's taking his undergraduate core, which we're getting through. We're on the tail end of that, and he's starting to get into the electives now. This is the tougher stuff, and he's interested in finance. So yeah, a lot of theories, a lot of graphs, a lot of formulas. So when we, first were notified, we met with the Office of Student Accessibility Services to figure out what Marshall's responsibilities were. So Marshall School of Business, it's, obviously one school under USC's umbrella. So the Office of Student Accessibility Services is central agency within USC. And Marshall had some responsibilities, OSAS had some responsibilities, so we needed to figure out where the handoffs were. And the student was taking 2 courses under Marshall's umbrella. He took 2 business courses in the fall, 3 courses in the spring. He took the summer off, and he has 4 courses coming in the fall. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. But by now, the professors know us, and they're aware of his presence. So, we're starting to work with the professors to look at the syllabi to remediate it. And we're talking with them about what the classroom environment is like. What do they need to adjust? How does TAs fit in? How can they support our efforts? And what materials do we need to look at to remediate? So where it came down to, whose responsibility is it? And yeah, of course, the short answer is everybody's responsibility. But within USC, there were specific responsibilities that OSAS had and specific responsibilities that Marshall had. And it fell upon the instructional design team and to a certain extent, Marshall's IT to come together and ensure that there was digital accessibility compliance, making sure that the student can use textbooks, PDFs, slide decks, make sure he can access the LMS, make sure he can take tests, and make sure that all of this can be accomplished through a screen reader. And OSAS took care of like testing accommodations, physical access, helping him get his textbooks, making sure he can enroll in courses correctly, and anything that had to do with central university processes. So that took a bit of time and a bit of finagling to work out, but it was an interesting reason because I would have loved OSAS to take the torch with this, but at the Marshall School of Business, they rightfully so consider our professors the experts. So OSAS wouldn't necessarily know what to do with, content and finance. The student's going to be taking a course in financial derivatives this upcoming term. So OSAS doesn't have like finance experts on tap to provide alternative text and make sure all the materials are up to date for the student. So that falls on Marshall to do. And we have the relationships with the professors, and we're kind of used to how those classes look normally. So it really is, a partnership in every sense of the word that, we're trying to we're trying to get everybody involved to make sure that the student has a positive experience. And, there's a lot to be said about, we call it the Trojan Network at USC. So, between Marshall and between the Central University OSAS office, I think we're surrounding the student with enough resources to get through. But going back to making sure content is accessible anyway, even if the student wasn't there, we're also working with the professors to make sure that those materials are provided after the student leaves the course, making sure that those materials are disseminated among all the professors teaching finance, teaching communications, marketing, all the different chunks of the business core to make sure that professors are replacing and updating their own materials as well. Even though this student might never see those professors or take that course at all, we need to make sure that these materials are kind of spread far and wide. So we're working with department coordinators and course coordinators and professors to make sure that happens. So we already were working with some professors anyway. I mean, our office's function is, we work with the MBA programs, and we also work with other professors that want to add educational technology to their courses. So when we're looking at educational technology, we also need to make sure that there's VPATs and there's accessibility statements. So we can judge when we're picking an educational technology like Vicarium or Padlet or something like PlayPosit. We need to make sure that those educational technology tools and vendors are looking at accessibility. And it was very helpful because we were running through, and some of the classes that the student has have PlayPosit bulbs in them posted in the LMS. We wanted to make sure that, we don't want to rip everything out and just replace it with a very boring PDF or a very boring Word document. Even those might be accessible, we still want to provide the pedagogical experience. We want to provide that engagement. We want to make sure that this student can engage with the material and learn from it and in the correct way, rather than just digesting watered down versions of the same content. So it was, very gratifying when I asked my CSM at PlayPosit, hey, is PlayPosit accessible? Because, we have a student coming in, they're going to need to, launch the videos, they're going to need to listen to the closed captioning, they're going to need to use the interactions that we plug into those videos. And she was like, sure, hey, go to this link. So PlayPosit has a really great knowledge base article on how to use all the accessibility features. PlayPosit itself is accessible, but the content that we put into PlayPosit also needs to be accessible. So while, it's great that I know a student can actually open up PlayPosit with a screen reader, play the video, hear the closed captioning come through, I want to make sure that they can answer the questions, that the branching works, all that sort of stuff. So when you look at VPATs, it provides a great template, and PlayPosit has all these VPATs available on their site under that knowledge base link, and the VPATs have a template where they say every function of what the player does, what the dashboard does, what the designer does, and whether it meets WCAG standards and at what level, and does it fully fulfill it or does it partially fulfill it. Luckily scrolling through, it was pretty much meets the whole way down. But the knowledge base article goes beyond showing what, having links to the VPATs. So, procurement specialists can look at the product and say, oh yeah, it's okay, and check off a box. The knowledge base article also shows how instructors, instructional designers can go through and make sure that the accessibility extends all the way down to the interactions and the content that we put in it ourselves. By providing accessible formula builders, by providing alternative text for the images that are in there, using structured heading levels, even the features of the video player are great for students with sensory disorders, anxiety disorders. They can adjust the speed of the video, so you can play it shorter or longer. So I really applaud PlayPosit for taking this effort and putting this much thought into it, because that's what convinced me to kind of present about this and share my journey remediating a bunch of PlayPosit bulbs. But I'm just going to flip over and show this is the knowledge base article. So you can see the links to the VPATs are right here, but it goes through and it shows player shortcuts. So if you're limited to keyboard use and there's like movement disorder, well, you can't use a mouse. There's also, the function option keys, escape keys, and it shows you where the focus is brought as, instead of moving a mouse. Here we go. Here's a whole list of the keyboard instructions there. What will be read out by the screen reader, because that's always tough to test with a screen reader, but I have a video later so I can show you. Adding alternative text for an image. If you click on an image, and it'll give you a prompt to go in and put in the image description there. We use this quite a bit when we have all our charts. Adding alternative text for an equation. So if you have a MathML, the LaTeX, you could actually add a label to it, which actually speaks the equation, and not in like, LaTeX curly bracket space, blah, blah, blah terms. It actually has a common sense. You can actually put in a common sense spoken description of the equation, which we use quite a bit. The heading styles in the font bars are there. Headers are important because it structures text for a screen reader. A screen reader will go to a header and it'll decipher what the table of contents, as it were, for a piece of text will be. So it doesn't read or sound like one big wall of text. It'll say header, yada, 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 as the title. So, the student with the screen reader will know that, hey, it's a header. This is a subheader. And it prompts you heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So yeah, this rich text editor is great. You can add captions, and it even goes down to like the monitor page, how to access some of the functions. If you're a professor with accessibility needs, you can go and use the monitor. Okay, back to my tab. Okay, so how did we begin our approach? We reached out to professors to kind of discuss the usual teaching approach and what adjustments might need to be made. And this is in the classroom. This is kind of a classroom management activity where it's like, the professor tell us, oh, well, I break students out into groups, and I might have this activity, or I go up on the board and I write out these equations. One of the first encounters is like, well, the professor said, well, I use the whiteboard a lot. And I'm like, okay, how do you do that? And he would go up to the board and he'd just start writing an equation, and he'd turn around to his students. He's like, okay, this equation here, and he'd point to it. That doesn't mean anything to a student who's blind. So making sure that they're aware, and making sure like, okay, what needs to change a little bit? Instead of doing a lot of whiteboard work, you might want to opt for a screen I'm totally blanking on this. You might want to opt for a document camera or a screen capture device, and we want to make sure that those notes are sent home after the fact. With more complicated charts and equations, we would send those before the class off to the Office of Student Accessibility Services to see if we needed those graphs printed with their swell printer, so the graph can be felt in a tactile way with the lines. Those were some options that we needed to explore with professors. In addition, for the content that was posted week by week in the learning management system, slide decks, PDFs, those sort of things, we had to review those. And we had to work with student workers and graduate assistants and our own team to remediate the material. In some cases, if it was a rush job and it was a lot of material, we reached out to OSAS to get a little help, and they recommended vendors to us, such as Alliant, that was able to turn around the content and make it, remediate it for a student fairly quickly. It was always helpful to work with the department chairs too, because we were able to kind of tap grad assistants and student workers that had a background in the subject matter of the course that the student was, enrolled in. That way, there was additional context that could go towards, the alternative text. It's one thing for us to type, oh, this is a graph, and there's the x-axis, and here's the y-axis, and there's a diagonal line intersecting 0.35, and the slope of the line is y equals mx plus b, where b is the slope of the line. What relevance does that have in economics, or what relevance does that have in finance? Those student workers were able to kind of provide that additional context for the alternative text for those sort of materials. So, we asked for the materials beforehand, and for some professors, that was a bit of a struggle. So we promised a 3-day turnaround. In some cases, we got it the night before. And yeah, we did have some late nights there. But, for the most part, the professors really worked with us, I think, proactively to make sure they got us their materials. And they had questions along the way. Oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? How does a student going to encounter this material when we post it? So we would work through those things. Slide decks, USC's website, OSAS, had some great how-tos on how professors and how we can easily remediate material. I want to give a shout out to the Center for Education and Technology, CET, which gave us some guidance as well. And we also Googled. Harvard has some great resources too that we utilized. That was available without a password. So we got some ideas and we learned some steps. Microsoft with PowerPoints. They have some great how-tos as well. So we gathered all that material together. But now we come down to the videos. We didn't want to strip away the videos, obviously, and we didn't want to lose PlayPosit because it had some great engagement tools that our professors loved, the students loved, and we wanted to make sure that we could still provide that experience. And we couldn't post just the video for the student who was blind because we wanted to make it an equitable experience. If we were just going to post a video and like a hidden link, you know, that was kind of accessible just for that student, we don't want to other that student. You know, we want to make them feel part of the Trojan network. We want to make them feel part of a community in the class. Like I keep going back to community of inquiry. The students have as much of a stake in the course as does the professor, and together that builds the community. So there's no reason why this student should miss out on that just because we're giving him watered down versions of our content. So what did we do? We looked at our existing videos, the video content itself, and we made sure that our slides had, you know, appropriate color contrast review of the graphics following UDL guidelines. This wouldn't have aided the student who was blind, but it would, you know, help colorblind students that come in. So we decided if we're going to do it, let's just do it for everybody. So we went in and we looked at our materials. We updated some graphics as we needed. We made sure that closed captions were available, and we always default to adding closed captions to all of our content, but we looked really closely at some of the closed captions that we had in these courses to make sure that it was appropriate. And you know, more of a thing lately, we're discussing audio description. We haven't gotten there yet because audio description is a whole other thing, but audio description or descriptive audio is, I think it's available in some Apple TV shows. You know, that's where I've played with it, where somebody, a narrator, will describe a scene or describe like what's appearing on the screen above and beyond what the dialogue is. There was one course that came early on when our student was enrolled in an operations management course, and they were going to show 12 Angry Men in the classroom. And I'm sure everybody's heard of 12 Angry Men. It's, you know, a really seminal movie, but how is he going to watch a movie? Closed captioning and hearing the audio, and that'll only take it so far. So we didn't find a version that had audio description with it, but the script happens to be in public domain. And the script actually goes through the blocking, the scenes, who's sitting where at the table, who speaks up, what their mannerisms are, what the expression is on their faces. So that was, you know, a really kind of interesting discovery. And we were able to provide the script, and it, you know, gave the student an awesome experience. You know, listening to the movie, but actually having the script formatted for a screen reader. Obviously, we, you know, didn't just find some, you know, Xeroxed off PDF that's, you know, 50 years old. You know, but he was able to experience the movie just like the rest of the class would. When we got into PlayPosit, this is about PlayPosit, right? We needed to make sure the appropriate alternative text was there because we had charts, we had equations, and we had a weird sort of thing between LaTeX and MathML, which are two different ways of notation, markup. It's two different markup languages that's used to, you know, display more complex equations. I'll show an example soon, but we used ChatGPT to look at the charts, and we, you know, created a draft of alternative text from there, and we ran it past the TAs and the professors in order to provide alternative text in some of these cases, because, you know, some of these equations, like, you know, we couldn't really figure it out. Equatio is a great tool, and they have a free trial, which we've used up, and I'll try to show it a little bit in a demo that I have at the end of this. But it gives you kind of a spoken text alt description, but it'll also generate MathML from LaTeX. And in a lot of the LaTeX is used a lot by our economics professors, because it's considered, for scientific publications, that's considered a standard. MathML happens to be more accessible. So we had to kind of flip back and forth to make sure that the equations that the student was encountering were actually compliant with MathML. And this MathJack speech converter, that was a kind of a free tool we found. Excuse me. It was a kind of a free tool we found where we can, just kind of bookmark and paste in some latex, and it'll give us a spoken word version that we could put in the alternative text for an equation in conjunction with Equatio 2. So yeah, it was a lot of work. So we were going through our PlayPosit bulbs. We were going through the interactions, which were mostly multiple choice. And we were just making sure that the equations and the charts all had alternative text. And let's see, I could show you how we did it. So I'm not going to hear the audio on this, but I'm just going to let this play for a little while until, let's see. I'm going to let this play for a little while until like the interaction panel flies out. This was a screencast video recording that I did. So just to give you an example of what this sounds like. And this is PlayPosit in a screen reader.
Okay. And PlayPosit interactive video player, Google Chrome, David, work. PlayPosit interactive video player, clickable. Folder view. Player main landmark video controls region play bulb button, less than the quantity level, at which price is equal to marginal costs. Say at the quantity level of 4, we get a dead weight loss, that is, the yellow shaded area could be gained by moving from 4 to 6. Likewise, if we overproduce, there, we get a dead weight loss at 8 units. We get a dead weight loss again, given by the yellow shaped triangle. Only at 6 do we eliminate that dead weight loss and maximize welfare. Sidebar panel region sidebar interaction. Press tab to begin. The graph depicts the supply and demand curves for pocket watches, with the x-axis representing the quantity, Q, and the y-axis representing the price, P. The supply curve slopes upward, while the demand curve slopes downward, intersecting at the equilibrium point. A vertical dashed line marks Q equals 3 on the x-axis and intersects the supply curve at a price level of 30 and the demand curve at a price level of 80, illustrating the price differences at Q equals 3. Another vertical dashed line marks Q equals 8 on the x.
Okay, I'm not sure how far that played, but I want to. Okay, so yeah, this was the part I wanted to get to. So using the tab key, somebody with a screen reader can go through, and as they tab through, different elements get highlighted. So what you heard in the beginning was alternative text on the chart, which we developed in part with ChatGPT and proofed by a professor or the grad assistant. And then the question text is read, and then you could tab through the different choices, 50, 80, 125. And when the student selects the answer, the tab focus will go to the submit key, and you could see kind of that little black highlight around there. And then it will read through the feedback for the correct answer, which is great. So, all of this is accessible with a screen reader. He's using the NVDA screen reader, and we've employed that for testing. And it is kind of a bit of a struggle, and I'll check the comments here, but the screen reader was reading the captioned portion of the video, and I think our production team went in and turned on captions for the videos. So you're hearing the professor's audio along with the captioning, so it probably caused a little bit of dissonance there, and I apologize for that. But really, the screen reader part, reading the content in the interaction, that's the part I want to get to and show in the video. So if I flip over to, let's see, if I flip over to one of the videos we had, and this is like another one of the PlayPosit bulbs in here, you'll see down here is the Equatio editor. So you could turn on like discovery, And these were already input by a professor. So what we did was this little pop-up here is part of the Equatio overlay. So you can actually capture the math. And I don't know if you could hear in the share, but you can actually play the audio. It would be q to the power of d times p equals 12 minus p. But you can click more options, and you have this. You can copy the MathML, and you can copy the LaTeX. So if these are just images without any alt text, you can copy the LaTeX and put it straight into PlayPosit, or you can use the MathML. You can copy that and flip over to, where do I have it? This is the MathJack speech converter. This is what we've used. So if I copy the MathML, oh, sorry, not sharing. Okay, this is the MathJack speech converter. So this is the bit we used, and we could copy the MathML in here, and I could convert that. And you see the expression that was in the PlayPosit poll, but you see upper Q subscript, upper D baseline left parentheses. There's like a verbose output, and then there's a clear speech output. The D power of Q of P equals 12 minus P. See, I read that wrong. I'm not a math major, but this, we could readily grab as alternative text. So depending on what kind of content you have in PlayPosit, there's always a MacGyver way of getting around to developing great alternative text and making that, and some tools to make that equation accessible to a screen reader. MathML is great because screen readers will see this in a source code and it will read it correctly. But if you don't have that, or if it's in LaTeX, you can actually take the clear speech output and put that as alternative text behind the scenes. So I think, let's see, we're going back to PlayPosit now. Let's see, I wanted to get out of this question, and I wanted to actually go to the question that, here we go. Okay, so just another little thing about the format bar. So the alternative text, this is where we kind of put in that ChatGPT text, and I could kind of flip over to what I did with ChatGPT. I loaded the graph in there, and I had to go through a few versions. I had to specifically ask it for alternative text, but ChatGPT went all the way through, market equilibrium and deadweight loss and those sort of things to kind of talk about all the background. It's like, no, I don't want all that junk. Just give me the alternative text. So I'm going to go back to my PlayPosit. So yeah, you just put the image description in here and it'll be, read by a screen reader. And let's see, you also have to do it in the feedback as well. So I got the alternative text in here as well. L equals 1/2 times open paren 8 minus 3, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was, quite a bit of work. We employed a few, we tapped our instructional designers and we worked with a few student workers to go through all of this content in our economics class. We're preparing for the student who's blind, but we'll report back on how this goes. So I think that kind of caps off what I had to talk about. So any questions?
Hey, David, thanks so much. This was an amazing presentation. I took some notes throughout, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and experience here. So first of all, thank you so much.
Yeah, and my pleasure. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim to be an expert on this. I'm a user of PlayPosit just like everybody else in here. And PlayPosit was very helpful in pointing out what things I could do, what I can add, how to navigate all through this stuff. But really partnering up with the professors to look at all their content from a 30,000 foot level and figuring out how we can make it a more equitable experience That was really the point I wanted to get across, is just, it's everybody's responsibility to do this. And thankfully, PlayPosit makes that part easy. We don't have to shortchange the student experience for him or the other students in class by just saying, oh, well, let's just put up the video and a Word transcript. That's not what we want. We want the students to be engaged. We want them to have an opportunity to go through those knowledge checks, test their knowledge, experience adaptive learning if they're, demonstrated mastery of a certain concept. And, PlayPosit can help that. So it's great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting some of the features that are in the tool to help the work that you're doing. I think one quote that you shared earlier on that resonated with me, I'm going to paraphrase, but you said, it can be kind of a legal problem, right? You're not a lawyer, but really this is everybody's opportunity. And I think that's the kind of salient point here, is that this is an opportunity to leverage the features in a tool to help meet the needs of all learners. And so just, scanning the chat here, I answered a few questions along the way to folks who were asking those in the chat. We have one recent one here from Patrick around, can we use music? So if I'm understanding your question, Patrick, as an alternative to pulling in a video source, you actually can upload an MP3 file and build a bulb around that and add interactivity to, let's say a recording of a podcast or a song or something that might be involved in a language course. So you can upload an MP3 if that's what you're asking, Patrick. And Raquel asked earlier, David as well, just about, how do you, let me just actually get the question right here. Can you import any video and add the transcript and have those accessibility features? So I answered about the video. I think in terms of the transcript, you can pull in captions that are available. If it's YouTube video, it'll automatically have those available. You can fetch the captions there. If you use a private video host, those will be pulled in as well. But I think the features that you shared, David, around accessibility, those are built into the PlayPosit tool. So you don't really need to do anything extra to enable those. Just know where they are. Yeah.
With our video content, the content that Marshall produces, we host at Vimeo. And Vimeo, they're playing catch up with YouTube, but they do have auto captioning. They do have transcript generation. But we get our captions from a third party called Rev, because they do a tight turnaround and they do it accurately. It doesn't do the machine learning kind of AI version of the auto captioning. You've got real people punching this up. So we trust their captions and we trust their transcripts. So we default to using Rev captioning just to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah,
that's just an extra information for everybody.
No, that's a great example of a third-party captioning tool that can help support this work. And then once those are in PlayPosit, you can still edit the captions there as well, which is nice. And Patrick, if there's any follow-up questions from that original question there, just let us know. We can stick around for a little bit longer.
I saw a question back here about caption display, where it's blocking the video. Oh yeah, you answered that. Yeah, we've experimented with that. We just try to keep our on-screen elements out of the way of the captioning. Some of our other videos, we do have lower thirds and chirons that come across with the name and title, or if we're defining an industry-specific term, and the captioning would overlap that. So yeah, we've had to go back and adjust some things, but that's a good point.
Right.
But in PlayPosit, you can also sideload that content.
Yes.
You have to make sure you add the transcripts in PlayPosit to do that, rather than adding them in Vimeo, however.
Yes. And once those transcripts are enabled there, you can set up that feature. The transcripts are also searchable too, which I like. So learners can search for a keyword or phrase and see what timestamps that might show up in a video as well. Excellent. Well, just scanning the chat here, I don't see any extra questions that we haven't answered yet, but let's stick around for one more minute in case anything comes up.
Okay, I'm gonna put I just realized I did not offer my email. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, in the comments. So if you have questions, you could certainly reach out to me afterwards.
That's great. Thank you so much for offering that support, David. And additionally, I'll just put, while we're talking emails, our success team email. And David mentioned his customer success manager has been super helpful. This is our team's email. So if someone out there is not sure who to reach out to, that's a good first step for any questions about PlayPosit. We can support you there. And I did share just in the chat, David, earlier, the YouTube tutorial and the knowledge base article I think you mentioned at one point as well. So folks should have those. Someone asked earlier just about the recording of this session. So it is being recorded, and you can, just by clicking the same link that you used to join today, you can access the recording and watch it on demand anytime. You can register after the fact as well. And then the YouTube page will have the session there as well. So a few ways to access it. If you want to go back at any point and check it out. But feel free to share the session with others. Double checking one more time for questions. Scott, thanks for the positive feedback there.
Oh, I think Patrick followed up. He was music history.
Yes. Excellent. So right. And if you're looking to upload an audio file, that could work here as well. But Patrick, if you have follow-up questions, we'll take them here in the chat or email as well. Is great. All right. Going once, going twice. Thanks so much, David. Appreciate your help, support.
And thanks for everybody joining.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone who joined today and who are going to watch on demand as well. Until next time, take care.